Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we will be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Ches Amid Aleph. So we are continuing to learn Hilchas Tesias Kapayim, the halachas that govern Birchas kohanim, or what we know colloquially as duchening, and we are holding in Siman Kuf Chav Ches. We pick up today on Ches Amid Aleph, second line down in the Mechaber with Sif Lamid Dalid. Says the Mechaber, Katan Shaloi Hevi Shtei Sa'aros. A katan, if you have a kohen who's a minor child, and he has not yet presented with two pubic hairs. So that's physiologically, he has not yet presented as a gadol. We're not talking about chronologically. Chronologically, the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us that nowadays, if a kohen, a young boy, is over the age of 13, we assume that he's physiologically a gadol. We assume that he has shtei sa'aros, and then this halacha would not pertain to him. The reason for that is because whenever we're dealing with the D'Rabbanan, we learned this earlier on in the Mishnah Berurah, whenever we're dealing with the D'Rabbanan, we could rely on the fact that a child is already the age of 13, he's already a gadol. What are we dealing with over here? Even though Birchas kohanim is a daraisa, there's no daraisa that prevents a minor from performing Birchas kohanim. We're going to see that the problem of a katan performing Birchas kohanim is only an issue of kavod hatzibur. That's all we're dealing with. So Mamela, if we have a kohen who's a katan, who's already over the age of 13, we treat him as a gadol, and then this halacha does not apply. So what does the Mechaber say here? Katan shaloi hevi shtei sa'aros. If we have a minor kohen who is not yet the age of 13, and physiologically he has not presented with shtei sa'aros, einoi noiseis kapav b'ftei atzmai klal. He cannot duchen on his own at all. If he's the only kohen, he cannot duchen. Let's break right over here and take a look right away at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Kuf Chaf Aleph, Shaloi Hevi. We're talking about a minor child, a minor katan, a minor kohen who has not presented with shtei sa'aros. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'im nasa ben shlosh esrei shana v'yom echad. But if he's already over the age of 13, he's already at least 13 and a day, Talinon le'inyan zeh, we assume in regard to this halacha of being able to duchen, shemistama hevi shtei sa'aros, we could assume that he already has presented with shtei sa'aros. Uke'ein shepasak haRamah le'el b'simin nun hey. This is similar to the psak of the Ramah earlier on in Hilchas Tefillah in Siman nun hey, b'sif hey, b'hagah, where the Ramah talks about sending somebody up to daven for the amud, and he says that we can send somebody up to daven for the amud once he's over the age of 13. Okay, now let's continue here in Ois Katan Kuf Chaf Beis, Einoi Noisei. So a real katan cannot duchen. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Afilu ba'akroi. He can't duchen on his own. He can't be the sole kohen performing the duchening, even ba'akroi, even once in a while. Now, the reason the Mishnah Berurah says that is because we're going to see that in the next halacha, there are times when we let somebody duchen ba'akroi. We let them do it once in a while. But over here, if we have a real minor, a real katan, we don't let him duchen alone, even ba'akroi. Why? She'ein kavod tzibur liyos kefufin leberchas katan. Because it's not a kavod for the tzibur, that the tzibur should be dependent upon the bracha of a katan. You have a whole tzibur standing here, you have zaydis, and you have parents and everything else, and they're all standing here and they're all dependent on the bracha of a katan. That's not kavod hatzibur. So now let's go weiter here in the Mechaber. So that's the first halacha. The first halacha is you have a bona fide katan. He's not allowed to duchen if he is the only kohen. Aval, continues the Mechaber, however, im kohanim shehem gedolim, for the katan to duchen together with other kohanim who are gedolim. So you have a bunch of adult kohanim going up to the duchen. They want to take a katan with them. Noisei, then he could go up for nesias kapayim. That's the lashon of noisei. Noisei, he can duchen lilmoid ulehischanich. So that then, if he's doing it with other kohanim gedolim, then he could go up because that's already an issue of chinuch. The gedolim are going to show the katan the proper way to duchen. Remember, we had a lot of complex halachas over here of duchening. They have to train him. Now, the Bir Halacha says over here, let's take a look inside in the Bir Halacha, Avalim kohanim shehem gedolim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ayin ba'olos tamid. Take a look at the Sefer Olos Tamid. Shakasav writes the Ritzayin Loimar that the Mechaber wants to say over here, Sha'oz, in this case, when you have a katan is going to duchen together with gedolim, mutter afilu bekva, that you're allowed to do all the time. So the first halacha of the Mechaber was that a real bona fide katan is not allowed to duchen on his own, the only kohen. He's never allowed to do that. The next halacha is, if the katan is going to duchen together with gedolim, that he could do all the time. Every time there's duchening. If you're in Eretz Yisrael and there's duchening every day, the katan could duchen together with the gedolim bekva. He could do it all the time. V'chein masha kasav l'kamei. And so too, what the Mechaber is going to say shortly, umiu dafka ba'akroi ba'alma, in the case where the Mechaber is going to say that you can only do it ba'akroi once in a while, ritzayin alarma gamkin dafka b'fteyatzmai, that's only on his own. We'll see what he's talking about in a moment. So let's go back here into the Mechaber. So the Mechaber said 2 lines down near the end of the line, Avalim kohanim shem gedolim noisei l'maydu l'hischanech. If we're dealing with a katan who's going to duchen together with other adults, that is permissible. And adarabah, it's an Indian to teach him how to duchen properly. It's an Indian of chinuch. Says the Mishnah Berurah katan kuf chaf gimel l'ilmaid u'lehischanech. Umitamzeh, and since in this case the katan is going up to duchen for purposes of chinuch, rashoy levarech kamkein. The katan could make a bracha. A katan always makes a bracha when he does mitzvahs for chinuch. You teach your minor child how to light Chanukah neiros, he makes a bracha. You teach him how to take a lulav, he makes a bracha. You give him matzah by the seder, he makes a bracha. So too over here, the kohen who's a katan, he's going up to duchen for the purposes of chinuch. He makes the bracha, Asher kedishanu b'kedushasi shel Aaron v'tzivanu l'varech esam Yisrael ba'ahava. And he brings this down for the Magen Avraham. Continues to the Chavetz Chaim, v'chein kasav haradvaz b'chelik aleph b'simin tov kuf samachet. Now, the Chavetz Chaim makes an interesting point. We know there are many times that we speak about a child who is higia lechinuch, a child who has reached the age of chinuch. And typically we say that the age of chinuch is around 6-7 years old. Over here, says the Chavetz Chaim, the chinuch zeh, when we speak about the age of chinuch in the context of duchening, einoi kishar zmani hachinuch. It's not like the age of chinuch that we typically speak about, shehu kibar chamesh kibar shis. Over here, the Chavetz Chaim says, which typically we say is around 5 or 6 years old. What is the age of chinuch when it comes to duchening? Ki im b'sheyodea lisa kapav kiminhage hakohanim. When it comes to duchening, it takes more than that. When it comes to duchening, it's the age when the child could begin to appreciate and the child could begin to perform all of the details of duchening. In other words, we're not going to take a 5-year-old up to the duchen so that he could stand there next to his father, holding on to his father's talus and saying, I want a candy. That's not the proper age of chinuch for duchening. We need a child who could go up and who understands that he's going to lift up his arms, level with his shoulder, right a little bit over the left, how to hold his hands. Now, we're still talking about a child. He might goof up a little bit. That's the whole point of chinuch. In the beginning, he's not going to do it 100% right. But he's a child who's capable of being instructed, and he's capable of carrying it out, at least to a certain degree. That's the age that we're talking about over here, the age of chinuch for duchening. And if you look in the Shar Tzion, the Chavetz Chaim brings this down. This is actually based on the Gemara in Sukkah, Mem Beis Amid Aleph. I had a feeling it was a Chazal. I just didn't remember where it was. Okay, very good. Now let's go back into the Mechaber. It says the Mechaber, 3 lines down in middle of the line. So until now, we were speaking about a bona fide katan. We're talking about a katan who wasn't mevi shtei sairos, so he is not yet physiologically presented as a gadol. We learned in the Mishnah Berurah that practically speaking, once a child is over the age of 13, we could already assume that physiologically he's a gadol, and we treat him as a gadol in the context of duchening. But now the Mechaber qualifies that a little bit. Says the Mechaber, Umi shehevi shtei sa'aros. If we have a child who does physiologically present as a gadol, and in our case, practically speaking, we're talking about a child over the age of 13. He's not yet considered a bona fide gadol when it comes to duchening. So says the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber, Mi shehevi shtei sa'aros. If he is already physiologically an adult, noisei kapov, he could duchen, afilu b'fnei atzmai, even on his own, as the only kohen, umihu, however, dafka ba'akroi ba'alma, only once in a while, v'loi b'kvius, not all the time, ad sheyismale zekanoi, until he's old enough that he presents with a full beard. Now, this doesn't mean that he has to actually grow the beard. He could shave, but he's old enough already that he is capable of growing a full beard. So he presents, you can look at him, you can see the 5 o'clock shadow. So he presents already with a full beard. So take a look at what the Mechaber is saying now. The Mechaber is saying, even the one who is maybe shtei sa'aros, so even the child who's over the age of 13, not yet a bona fide adult when it comes to duchening. There's a qualifier. Such a person, he could duchen by himself, dafka ba'akroi ba'alma, only once in a while, v'loi b'kvius, but not all the time, ad sheyismale zekanoi, until he presents with a full beard, she'oz yachal lisa kapav afilu yechidi b'kva. At that point, once he presents with a full beard, now he could duchen as the only kohen, even b'kva, even all the time. And this is what the Bir Halacha that we read inside was referring to. If you take a look again at that Bir Halacha, where the Chavetz Chaim says a little bit into that Bir Halacha, v'chein masha kasav lekamei. So too, what the Mechaber writes later, a reference to what we just read, umihu dafka ba'akroi ba'alma, that the kohen who is over the age of 13, who is maybe shtei sa'aros, he could duchen even alone as the only kohen, but only once in a while. That means if he's duchening alone, if you have a 13-year-old kohen, he's allowed to duchen with other kohanim all the time. That he could do all the time. He could do that all the time even when he's less than 13, right? Because of chinuch. So once he's over 13, he certainly, now he could duchen all the time together with other kohanim. But if he's alone, then he could only do it ba'akroi ba'alma. Let's take a look here at the... Let's finish the Mechaber first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, a little bit into the line. Says the Mechaber finally, v'chol shehigia l'shanim sheroi lehismalois zekanoi. When somebody reaches the age where he's old enough that his beard should be filled out, af al pi sheloi nismalei, even though the beard physically is not filled out, Karinan Bey Nismale Zekanoi, we call this a person who is ready, Nismale Zekanoi, Va'ayin El Siman Nun Gimel Sivches, where the Ramah discusses this again in Hilchas Tefillah when we're speaking about appointing a Shliach Tzibur. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Kuf Chaf Daled. Umihu, when we're talking about a child who's over the age of 13, so he's maybe shtei sa'aros. He's allowed to duchen, but he could only duchen alone as the only kohen. What the Mechaber said, ba'akroi ba'alma, once in a while. He can't do it all the time. Says the Mechaber Kov Kavdalu mihu gamzehu mitam kavadat tzibur. This is again a question of kavadat tzibur. She'ein kvaydam she'yavarchim tamid b'kva u'biyachidi ish shaloi nismalei adayin zekanoi. It's not a kavod for the tzibur that on a constant basis, this 13-year-old, 14-year-old, who's not nismali zakanoi, who's not yet old enough to grow a full beard, he should be the one that's constantly giving brachas to the tzibur. That's not covered at tzibur. Ois katan kov chafei, the Mechaber said, such a person, a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, he could duchen alone ba'akroi. He could do it once in a while. Oh, what does once in a while mean? Says the Mishnah Berurah, uvemidasenu, uvemidinoisenu, in our medinos, in Chutz La'aretz, she'ein noisid kapayim el b'yomtiv, where we only have duchening on yomtiv, mutter lisa kapov b'chol regel, hafilu b'ftei atzmai. Says the Mishnah Berurah, for us chutzniks, this halacha really doesn't have a practical application, because he says for us, duchening is once in a while. Duchening is only on yomtiv. Memela for us, the 14-year-old, could duchen every yomtiv, because that's called ba'akroi ba'alma. And there's a strong reason to allow this kohen to duchen, kidei lachzuke nafshe b'kohanim, because he has to be machzik, he has to earn the reputation that he's a kohen. How do people know he's a kohen? Because he duchens. So that's the way that's the way the tzibur knows he's a kohen. So again, for us chutzniks, if you live in a small town and the only kohen that's available is a young kohen, right? So the question comes up, could he duchen? The Mechaber says he can only duchen alone. Remember, this is only a question of alone. Together with other kohanim gedolim, he could duchen as much as he wants. It's only a shaila when he's duchening alone. But in Chutz La'aretz, where we only have duchening on Yom Tov, he could duchen alone all the time, because that's called ba'akroi ba'alma. Deloi mikri zeh ela akroi, and the Chavetz Chaim brings this down from the Magen Avram and the Taz and other achronim. Kuf Chavav, the Ramah referenced back in Hilchas Tefillah v'ayin le'el, keloimar, the Sham Mavur, over there in Hilchas Tefillah, the Ramah explains that afilu hayaloi zakan muat, even if it's only a little beard, Karinan bein nismala is a kanoi imhum ben shmeina esrei shana v'mayla. Once somebody is over the age of 18, you see a little stubble here and there, even if you don't see a filled out beard, that is already considered nismala is a kanoi. The kaidem lechein, but if he's younger than the age of 18, beinan milui zakan mamish. If a 16-year-old wants to come and he wants to say, I'm old enough, it's a question, let's say, in Eretz Yisrael. So over there, it's a real shaila. He wants to duchen every day. He wants to do it b'derech kva, and he's the only kohen. And he says, "Look, I'm nismali zakanoi." So then you have to see, is he really nismali zakanoi? Once he's over the age of 18, you don't have to see if he's really nismali zakanoi. Now we move on to Sif Lamed Hey. Very interesting Sif. Take some people, I think, by surprise. Kohen shaharag es hanefesh, a kohen who killed somebody. Afilu b'shaygig, even if he killed somebody b'shaygig. So Nebuch, a kohen, was driving a car, and he hit somebody, and he killed somebody. Nebuch, chas v'chalil, Nebuch lo yaleinu. Happened. A kohen was driving a car, he hit somebody, he killed somebody. Afilu b'shaygig, even though this is completely a shaygig. By the way, it's kedai to remember what shaygig means. Shoygeg is not oines. Oines is when something was completely inadvertent, completely unavoidable. That's not shoygeg. Shoygeg is I wasn't careful. Shoygeg is there was an element of negligence to the shoygeg. So does haste, somebody was driving a car and he answered the phone, and the phone was on the passenger chair and he didn't have a headpiece and he went to look for his phone and he looked away and he hit somebody. That might even be shoygeg karv lamezid. But a person carries a certain element of blame when he does something b'shoygeg. That's why when somebody is over an avera sheyesh by kares, somebody's mechal Shabbos b'shoygeg, right? B'mezid, it would be either b'skila if there are edim and hasra, or kares if there's no edim and hasra, and if it's b'shoygeg, he has to bring a karbachatas. Why do you have to bring a karbachatas, right? A kid comes and says, "Oh, it wasn't my fault. It was a shoygeg." No, shoygeg, you weren't careful enough. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. A yid has a chrayas for his actions. A yid is mechuyev to be careful, especially when the nefashos are at stake. Shoygeg. A guy picks up a gun and he thought it was unloaded. He picked up the gun, he pointed at somebody, he pulled the trigger. You're a fool. Did you check the chamber? Or somebody told you? Or yesterday it was unloaded, right? So a guy comes and says shoygeg, right? You go to Golos for that. Bisman Abayis, you would have to go in Golus for that, for Azaz Shoigig. Right? So Shoigig carries a certain amount of blame. So Kohen Sharagas HaNefesh, Afilu B'Shoigig, if a Kohen killed somebody, even if he killed somebody B'Shoigig, Loi Yisa Es Kapov. He's not allowed to duchen. Afilu Asa Tshuva. Even if he did tshuva, he could no longer duchen. Haggah, says the Ramah, v'yesh oimrim d'amasa tshuva noise kapov. There are those that say that if he did tshuva, he could duchen. V'yesh lahakel al bali tshuva, and the Ramah says we should be makel when it comes to somebody who really did tshuva. Why? Shaloi linol delas bifneim. Because we want to show people that tshuva is effective. If we're going to say that somebody, even if he did a real sincere tshuva, he still can't duchen, people might look and they say, so what value is there to tshuva? Why should I do tshuva? So we have to show people the value of tshuva. So the Ramah says, okay, we should be making a bali tshuva shaloinilo delos b'fneim. And the Ramah says, v'achi nog, brings down from Torah, Rashi, the Ogur, the Beis Yosef, that's the way we're knowing that if he does tshuva, we let him duchen. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to say this is even by amazing. This is even by somebody who killed somebody b'mezid. If we know for a fact that he did a bona fide, sincere tshuva, we should be make. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Ois katan kuf chaf zayin. So we have a kohen shaharagas nefesh. We have a kohen who killed somebody. Why can't he duchen? So we learn this out from a pasuk. It's a pasuk in Yeshaya. This is a pasuk that we learn on Shabbos Chazon. Says the Mishnah Berurah the ksiv, because the pasuk says in Yeshaya, uvifarizchem kapechem. The Rabbeinu Shalom tells Klal Yisrael, when you stretch out your hands. Now, we understand that normally as a reference to tefillah, when you stretch out your hands in tefillah. But now we're darshaning it as a reference to Birchas kohanim, when the kohanim stretch out their hands. Uparischem kapechem, when you stretch out your hands, alim einai mikem, I will hide my eyes from you, says the Rabbeinu Shalom. Why? Because yedechem damim maleu, because your hands are filled with blood. So the Rabbeinu Shalom says, if you have blood on your hands, you can't stretch out your hands in Birchas kohanim. You're not the one that I want to be giving brachas to Klal Yisrael if you have blood on your hands. This is true even b'shoigeg. V'im anasuhu laroig. Chafetz Chaim brings down an interesting case. What if somebody was compelled? He was forced to kill somebody. So a guy came and put a gun to his head and handed him a gun in his hands and said, shoot him or I shoot you. Now we know the halacha is Yareg Val Yavar. Ritzicha is one of the Gimel Chamurais. It's one of the Gimel Averis Chamurais that you're mechuyev to give up your life for, right? Shvichas damim avodah zara gili arayos. Person is mechuyev to give up his life before he transgresses one of those Averis. So he's not allowed to do this. But the Chafetz Chaim says, V'im anasuhu laroig, if he was compelled to kill somebody. So in that case, the Mishnah Berurah it's brought down from the Maharnach. V'im anasuhu laroig, noisei kapov, he is allowed to duchen. Even though this is a mitzvah, this Yareg Val Yavar, so he's certainly not allowed to do it. Nevertheless, im avar v'loy nerag, if he transgressed this, and he did not allow himself to be killed, and instead he chose to kill the other person, he is not pasuled from Birchas kohanim on account of that wrongdoing. Interesting. Ois katan kuf chav tes, the Mechaber said that a kohen who killed somebody is not allowed to duchen, afilu asa tshuva, even if he did tshuva. Tam deyazu, the rationale for this opinion, the Mishnah Berurah says, these opinions hold that even though tshuva is so powerful that a person could always do tshuva, virtually always, echtev oshiv, maybe an can't the Rabban Shem withholds a person from doing tshuva, but generally speaking, the yesod is a person should never be miyayish from doing tshuva. Nevertheless, ein kateger nasis anegar. It's fine. Your tshuva is a tshuva, and your tshuva will be accepted in shamayim. But the bottom line is damim yedechem damim mileu. You still physically killed somebody, And now those hands that killed somebody is going to stretch out those hands for Birchas kohanim to bench Klal Yisrael. Ain't kateger nasasaneger. A prosecutor cannot become a defense attorney. So it just doesn't work. The hands that have blood on them, the hands that killed somebody, can't be stretched out in Birchas kohanim, even though the person did tshuva. I did have a chance to look into it, but I wanted to reacquaint myself and to look into where the Rabbeinu Shalom said that David HaMelech could not be the one to build the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash is called on David's name. It's referred to as Beis David. And David HaMelech was Moshe Nefesh for it. David HaMelech drew up the plans for it. David HaMelech bought the land for it. David HaMelech put away the money for it. David HaMelech did everything for it. And it's Nikreis al Shmai. It's called on his name. But he's not the one who built it. Shlomo HaMelech built it. And the Rebbeinu Shalom in the Nevuah to David HaMelech brought to him by Nasan HaNavi, I believe it was, said the reason you can't build the Beis HaMikdash is because you fought many wars and you have blood on your hands. So what exactly is at play over there? And is that similar? That the Beis HaMikdash, the Makam of the Karbonos, couldn't be built somehow by David HaMelech? Let's take a look at it and see if there's a relationship here. But now the Mishnah Berurah says an interesting thing. Dachaf isha hara v'hipila. Let's say a Kohen shoved an expectant woman, and because of that, she became injured and she miscarried. Dachaf isha hara v'hipila noiseis kapav. He is allowed to duchen. De'ein chayavin nisa al ubrin. Even though he killed the unborn child, you're not chayav misa for the murder of an unborn child. Not chayav misa. Murder, it is. But you're not chayav misa for that murder, and therefore this kohen would still be allowed to duchen. Ois katan kof lamed, the Ramah said, v'yesh oimrim, he brought down a yesh oimrim that said that if he did a sincere, real tshuva, he could duchen. Hainu afilu kisha'avra b'mezid. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even somebody who killed somebody b'mezid, yesh oimrim, that if he did a bona fide tshuva, we know that he did a bona fide tshuva, he could duchen. That's the way we are. There are some achronim that are machmir on a kohen who killed somebody b'mezid. V'ayin b'bir halacha. If you want to see it, there's an interesting bir halacha. Bir halacha dibra maskal afilu asa tshuva. I think he blibes with a tzarech iyun. All the way at the end, he says v'tzarech iyun ledina. What we should do by somebody who killed somebody b'mezid and he did tshuva. Okay, next sif lamed vav. Bottom line here on Ches Amid Aleph says the Mechaber on the same theme. Mol tinoik umes. Let's say somebody's a moil and he did a bris milah, and we know that a bris milah could be dangerous. Mol tinoik, a moil did a bris milah on a tinoik, on a child, baby, umes, and the baby subsequently died. The halacha is noiseis kapav. He's allowed to duchen. Says the Mishnah Berurah katan kof lamed beis. Mol tinoik umes. Chada. One reason is the ikavin l'shem mitzvah. Because over here, it's not a question of ein kateg or das sanegar. This is not a question of a simple murder or a murder b'shoigeg. This is a moil who went to be mekayim the mitzvah of milah. And now an oinus happened. Something happened over here and the child died. So we don't call that a murder b'shoigeg. He was a kavin the mitzvah. Void, and furthermore, mi yemar de kololei chadashav. There's another angle over here. There's another mitigating circumstance over here, and that is that since we're dealing with a baby, we have another svara, and that is we're talking about a baby who died, who's perhaps 8 years old, 8 days old. How do we know that he's not a nefil? We know that we consider a ben kayama. How do we know that a child is truly a viable child? We know that a child is truly a viable child when he lives at least 30 days. Now over here, we're talking about a tinoik who died after the bris milah. What was he, 8 days old? 9 days old? How do we know for sure that he was viable? Maybe he wasn't Kalulei Chadashav. Maybe he really wasn't a full-term baby. And since he wasn't a full-term baby, that's why he died. So we don't even know for sure that he died as a result of the bris milah. If you're wondering what I'm doing over here, just taking a quick look. This concept that the reason we allow him to duchen is because he was a chaven lemitzvah came from a Magen Avram. I just wanted to see if the Magen Avram expanded upon that at all and said why the fact that he was mechaven l'shem mitzvah is a mitigating circumstance. He doesn't. All the Magen Avram says is the ichaven l'shem mitzvah. He doesn't expand upon it at all. Okay, let's finish up over here. The Mishnah Berurah in Kuf Lamed Beis says further another mitigating factor. Va'oid shema haruach bil balatoi akakach umeis, could be that the death wasn't really as a result of the actions of the moil. Maybe what happened is the moil did the milah, and that weakened the child, and then a bad ruach came, whatever that means exactly, and that's what killed the child. So again, it's not in any way the fault of the moil. Now let's just finish this sif. The last few words on the bottom line here of Ches Amud Aleph says the Mechaber, and this is not going back on the moil. This is a new halach. Let's say there's a person that people are speaking about. Oh, him? He's a murderer. Oh, you don't know the story? So people are meranim acharav. There's a rumor going on. Meranim means that they're chirping. You know, they're singing. It's like the birds, right? A little birdie told me. So if you have a person, the people are talking about him, that he's a murderer. But there's no edim. It's not an established fact. Says the Mechaber, Kevin Shalonis Bar Davar, since it hasn't been made clear that Itaki is a murderer, Yisa as Kapav, he is allowed to duchen. The final Mishnah Berurah begins on Ches Amud Aleph, the bottom line. Ois katan Kuf Lamed Gimel, Meranin Nemachrav. If the people are speaking about him, that he's a Shofech Damim, Loikai Amol Tinoik. This is not going back on the first halacha of this sif, on the moil. We're not talking about the moil here. When it comes to the moil, even if there were Eidim there by the Milah, there's the Sandik and Al Yada Sandik and everybody else, and there's plenty of Eidim. We know for a fact that he was the moil and he did the Milah and subsequently the child died. Noise Kapav. He is allowed to duchen. Over here we're talking about a different case. We're talking about people, there's a rumor going around about a person that he's a murderer. Afilu hachi, still in all, Kevin she'ein Eidim, since there are no Eidim testifying to the fact that he's a murderer, ein lepasla b'nesias kapayim, we can't passel him from duchening. Umiu, hu ba'atzmahi im yedeh she'emesu. Let's say the guy knows that he himself knows that he's a murderer. Says the Chavetz Chaim, if he himself knows that he's a murderer, lo yisas kapav, he should not duchen, he should go out before Ritzei, and he should stay out until after Birchas kohanim. Bein la'atzmai, bein im kohanim acherim, whether he's the sole kohen or he's doing together with a group of kohanim. If he knows he's a murderer, he has no business doing nesias kapayim. We're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Sif Lamed Zayin. I want to remind the Olam that I am going to try to stick in a shir tomorrow. Even though Erev Shabbos, generally we don't have shir, I'm going to try to say shir tomorrow so that we should catch up to the Dirshu schedule and we should be on the Dirshu page. Right now we're one page behind. So if I put in a shir tomorrow, we'll be back on the Dirshu page. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This list of limud HaTorah should be Megan on Gans Klal Yisrael. The Ron Shem should send Yeshua's Refuah's Parnas and Shaduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the Bias Tzedek b'meher of Yameinu. Amen. Be well.